So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is, I'm going to say it one more time. We are doing our third community meeting of the fall, and tonight we have no new information, but we are recapping the first two presentations that we did at Essex Elementary School. And we were thrilled to be here at the Memorial School tonight and show off this building, which is actually the product of many of the members that are on our project team. So before we get started and kind of run through the details for you, we're going to do some quick introductions. I'm Pam Bowden, the superintendent of schools. And to my left, we have Rachel. We'll kick off introducing ourselves from Dora and Whittier, our owner's project manager. They are the team that will help shepherd us through this project, look out for our best interests, and make sure we get the most cost-effective project that suits our educational needs. So Rachel.
Sure. Hi, I'm Rachel Rincon, Assistant Project Manager at Dorn Whittier. And I'm Christina Delangelo, Project Director with Dorn Whittier. With us, we have
John Albright, Project Manager, Dorn Whittier.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Lopasta with JCJ Architecture, and with me is
Fawn Pellegrini, JCJ Architecture.
And I want to introduce two more members of the school team. We have Michelle Cresta, who is the Director of Operations and Finance. And in the back is Kim Provost, Principal of the Essex Elementary School. Additionally, we have a few members of our building committee. If you wouldn't mind, you could stand or you could wave and say hello and introduce yourselves.
I'm Teresa Whitman. I serve on the school committee and I'm co-chair of the school building committee.
And Cameron.
And I think that brings introductions to a conclusion. I do see
Tim McDonald online.
Yep.
Hi, Tim.
All right. So
Hey,
shall we
everyone.
get?
Yeah, why don't you go to the next slide, Rachel? So in case you want to hear again, just we're working with the Mass School Building Authority, which we like to call the MSBA. And they're a state agency that helps schools, cities, and districts within the Commonwealth fund school projects. And so we are working with the MSBA on the Essex Elementary School project, and we'll be receiving some sort of reimbursement from the state in support of the project itself. And how the MSBA works as far as for every taxpayer dollar, a penny goes towards schools within the state. So what they do with that money is they like to spread out that money throughout the different projects that are currently within the MSBA, Mass School Building Authority pipeline. And this project is one of those schools right now going through that process. So what we wanted to talk about as far as how does MSBA determine the financial support? So their reimbursement rates are calculated based on a formula, and the formula starts at all districts, cities, and towns at a rate of 31% of eligible project costs. So your base rate in Essex is 31%, and that's based off of community income factor, poverty wealth factor, and poverty factor. And there's an additional 6 points that we could achieve in addition to the 31%, which comes from the Green School Initiative, as well as the district's maintenance policy. So what does eligible project costs mean? The MSBA uses a budget template to apply, calculate their funding policies to just determine the grant amount. So the MSBA's reimbursement rate is applied to eligible project costs to determine the MSBA's participation on each budget line item. There are things like construction and site that are capped at $605 a square foot, as well as site at $73 a square foot. There's furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and technology. All determine what your eligible project cost is going to be after we finalize the project budget with the MSBA. And so there's also caps or things that are called categorically ineligible that MSBA will not participate in. That includes things like pools, field houses, auditoriums, central offices, senior centers, site acquisitions, and offsite improvements. I just wanted to give a recap of what the Manchester Memorial Elementary School effective reimbursement ended up being. Was just like the Essex project, you're starting at a base rate of 31%. At that time, that project decided to go at the CM at risk construction delivery method, which provided an additional 1% for reimbursement. That is no longer available through the MSBA process. But you did receive for maintenance 1.93% additional reimbursement. And then you also achieved the energy efficient school at 2%. So your reimbursement rate ended up being 35.93%. And what I was talking about with all those caps before on the previous slide is that you start with that rate at 35.93, but when you have all of those caps that are associated with things like construction and site and with furniture, fixtures, and technology, as well as hazmat removal, asbestos removal, that lowers the effective reimbursement rate because they're trying to be transparent with all of the projects that are within the pipeline. So your effective reimbursement rate ended up being around roughly 23%, which was 11.5 million from the state. This slide shows the different modules and the process that's prescribed by the MSBA that we have to follow throughout the different phases. We are currently within the feasibility study phase. What does the feasibility study phase mean? Is that we're going to be studying multiple iterations of options, if you want to go to the next slide, which include the preliminary design program phase. And that's where we identify issues, articulate the educational plan, and list options to be studied within the preferred schematic report phase. We are finalizing our preliminary design program phase at the end of this month, and we'll be submitting that information to the MSBA in January, where we'll conclude then into the preliminary schematic report phase, where we take the alternative options that we're going to study tonight and further refine them and continue to decide what is the preferred option for the project itself. We want to go to the next slide. This is a preliminary schedule that's based off of the MSBA timeline and feasibility study phase schedule that we put together to outline the next couple of months and year or so. So like I said, we're going to be submitting our preliminary design program at the beginning of January, which then leads us into the preferred schematic report. We'll be submitting that to MSBA end of May of 2026. And then we'll start our schematic design phase, which is where we take the preferred option of the building and site, and then we'll further design it and refine it, which will then lead to the local approval process tentatively in fall of 2026. Again, this is a preliminary schedule that is subject to change. And then part of the feasibility phase requirements, MSBA requires us to study several options, but we have to be specific with having at least one renovation only, an addition renovation option, and a new construction option. In addition to the 3 different types of buildings that we have to study, we also have to study your enrollment configurations that you did agree to study with the MSBA as part of your contract with them. That includes grades pre-K through 3, 165 students, grades pre-K through 5, 250 students, and grades pre-K through to 5, 515 students. For the pre-K through 3, 165 student scenario, that is cited in Essex, which means that the grades 4 and 5 would need to be integrated into the Memorial School. This would also mean that the school committee program would need to vote redistricting, and school committee would need to vote to amend the regional agreement. From there, if that is the path that you choose to go down, then you would have to have Essex and Manchester both town meeting vote to approve their regional agreement amendment. For the grades pre-K through 5 option with 250 students, that's cited in Essex, and that doesn't require any of the additional parameters involved with redistricting and town votes. For pre-K to 5, with a 515 student option, that is cited at Manchester Memorial with all Essex and Manchester students in one school. That would also include school committee program, vote redistricting, a vote to amend the regional agreement, and additional town meeting vote to approve the regional agreement amendment as well. So the Essex and Manchester town meeting full project vote and debt exclusion vote information. Jim, you want to talk about the building history?
Okay, sure. And I'm going to stand so I can see people, if that's all right. So yeah, we can very quickly go over what the Essex Elementary School is. I mean, the building is 68 years old. It was built in 1957. It is, you know, when you walk in it feels pretty good because the district has done a great job of taking care of it. That's why when we did this building, as was just being pointed out, you received almost the full 2% on maintenance because the district takes care of its buildings, but they're old buildings. So when you go through and you look at the current Essex Elementary School, it's about just under 53,000 square feet in terms of its total size. You know, every building has a lifespan. The structure in a building can last pretty much forever. The roof has to be replaced every 20 years. The mechanical systems, you're lucky if you get 20 years out of a lot of the parts. Parts of it will last forever. Other parts wear out. And then things like roofs and windows eventually deteriorate. No matter how well you take care of them, they eventually have to be replaced. And when you're pushing 70 years, you've gotten your money's worth out of the building without doing major replacements. You go to the next slide. So these are just we've got some photos. You certainly, I think, could probably go over and tour the building with advance notice almost anytime you want. I'll go out on a limb with the principal sitting in the back, but she's nodding. So you got roof issues in terms of ponding water, and it's really reached its life expectancy, needs to be re-roofed. You go to the next slide. Lots of issues right now with the exterior brick, not unusual for building this age. Lots of moisture infiltration, cracking, normal building issues that you would see, but at some point they need to be taken care of. A lot of the original windows were wood, and no matter how many times you paint them, they eventually begin to fall apart. They're not thermally broken, so they don't have good insulation. You don't meet current energy codes. There's a lot of things to think about with the exterior of the building, and there's drainage issues all the way around the building. The land just doesn't slope the right way. You don't have good drainage, so there's a lot of water that collects in ponds and infiltrates where it shouldn't be. Accessibility is a concern. When this building was built, folks weren't so much concerned about access for everybody. The district has done a good job of making it accessible around the building, but there are many areas that simply aren't, where you have stairs and no ramps. You have no ability to get to the lower level. Outside on the site, sidewalks don't slope in the right way. Again, we talked about drainage issues and just general lack of full accessibility as is required by the ADA since 1990, and is good practice on all new buildings that are supposed to be accommodating to all people. You go to the next slide. Inside, as we talked about, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems have all reached their useful life and beyond. Most of them need to be replaced. They can't be repaired any longer. You can sort of patch them together, but if you want to get significant amount of life out of them, you're going to be continually pumping money into these, and at some point you simply need to replace them. They're not efficient. They don't work properly anymore, and parts are hard to come by for many of these systems because they're just so old that they're not manufactured anymore. Go to the next slide. And these are just some photos. What's interesting is I was looking back when we designed this building, we also toured the Essex Elementary School, and that water on the floor has been there since we toured the Essex Elementary School 10 years ago initially. So this has been an ongoing issue that the district does its best to mitigate. Go to the next slide. Entry and entry sequence, as I think you're all too well aware, we had some questions on the tour. School security and safety is a major concern. It wasn't in 1957 when all the doors were open. Schools we design today have a much stronger security aspect to them, both with the exterior, but also how you get in the building. And right now, there's no secure vestibule. There's no way to check people in what I would consider a modern manner, as you have at your other school projects. So issues here to be dealt with. Go. So that's a very high overview. There is a report that we're doing on the existing conditions. It's very extensive, and it will be posted on the website as part of this next phase. So you'll be able to review that in detail if you want to deep dive into any of these areas that we touched on. So when we begin this process, and as was pointed out, this is a very structured process, and it's a good thing. The MSBA wants the district and the architect and the OPM to go through this in a pretty logical fashion. And so we start by looking at the existing school and identifying deficiencies, which we've done. There's an educational program that is written by the district, which has been done and we'll be talking about. But then when we think about the actual building, we have to start by looking at the site. Where will we build the school? And they don't automatically assume it will be at the current school site. So we're required to work with the town or towns to identify other possible parcels of land that might be available and review them to see if they make any sense as a site for a school project. So we went through that process. Two sites we have to look at because they were in what the district agreed to look at with the MSBA. One is the current Essex Elementary site, and the other is this site because they're both currently school sites. And as we went through some of them, the options require us to look at these. So then we looked at other potential sites in the town of Essex, and we working with the district and the town, there were 112 parcels owned by Essex. And that's important because you really need to work with land that is already under the control of the municipality. The MSBA will not reimburse you for buying private land. So if there was a great piece of farmland that would be perfect for a school and you want to buy it, you're welcome to do that, but you have to pay, the taxpayers will have to pay for 100% of that. There'll be no reimbursement. So you really start by looking at town-owned parcels. So we looked at 112. We needed a minimum of 9.75 acres to fit the school. That's what you have now. So that narrowed it down right away to 16 parcels that would even fit a school building. Then if you look at ones that actually have street access and utilities, because in Essex, they own an awful lot of land that's mostly marsh and has no, it's owned as conservation land. So it was on the list, but it's really not buildable land. So that was down to 7. And then when we looked at other sites, what doesn't already have something on it, like a library or a town hall or a fire station or a ball field, that really only left one site that was viable to study. And that was a site at 30 Apple Street, which we did look at this past fall. We go to the next slide. These are the 3 sites. We studied all 3. And ultimately, to cut to the chase, the Apple Street site was voted on by the building committee and removed from further consideration based on, I think, what the next slide will show us, right?
It's,
Sorry.
yeah, it's further down.
Yeah. Well, based on the constraints. So
Yeah.
the way we go about evaluating things, and this is also an MSBA requirement, and you'll see this for those of you who continue coming, you'll see this again and again. The way this starts is the school building committee in conjunction with the professionals come up with a list of criteria that'll be important, in this case, for a school site. And then we put the school sites across the top, and then we do the investigation. We come back with our findings about various suitability elements, and then begin to rate the sites. So green means it's advantageous. Red means it's not preferable, and yellow is kind of neutral, could go either way. So when you look at this, when we worked with the building committee to rate the sites, the current Essex site was mostly green. It's currently a school, a lot of good things going for it, site utilities, the size of the place, the fact that it's already a school, road access. This site had a lot of red, primarily because it's already got a school on it that takes up most of the land. So it's not that this is a bad site for a school. It's a really good site for a school. That's why we're in this one. But it's not a great site to add on to. There's just not a lot of room here. You have a river, you have river setbacks, you have underground water retention. You don't have a lot of room between the building and the neighbors that you can build on. So this is a very challenging site. You also would have very severe traffic issues here. This project solved a lot of the previous traffic issues. If we build here, right now the traffic studies are saying we will add a lot more traffic back on Lincoln Street and kind of recreate what the issues were previously that we just fixed. So that's why you see so much red. I don't want anybody to think this is a bad site for a school. It's just that it's not the best site for an addition. And then lastly, when we looked at Apple Street, a lot of red there as well. Some of the big issues at Apple Street, to hit the highlights, were Apple Street itself. It's a very narrow, winding 2-lane road with no sidewalks that crosses a bridge. All of that would need to be rebuilt, and none of that would be part of the project. So that would have to be a town of Essex project. It would have to get coordinated. The site itself, while it was nice and large, it's adjacent to the transfer station and a closed landfill. And there are regulations against building next to closed landfills. And it used to be agricultural, so the environmental testing or initial environmental testing set up a lot of red flags about what might be in the soil, and you would need to spend a lot more money to figure out what's down there. So there were a lot of negatives that ultimately led to removing that from consideration. So now we'll be focusing from this point on just the 2 school sites, both the Essex Elementary and the site we're at today on Memorial. So then where we are now is in this phase, we're trying to develop a set of alternatives that we will look at in more detail in the next phase, which will start in January. So today I want to emphasize we don't have any school designs, but we have our approaches that need to be studied in further detail. And you start with a lot, and then you try to narrow them down to a manageable number. The MSBA doesn't want us looking at 100 different options. They'd like us looking at 6 to 10 options, spread across a variety of options. So again, we're setting up a chart. We haven't fully filled out the left side yet. We're coming up with the criteria. I think we're talking about that at the next school building committee.
Yeah, I mean, we've reached out, we've gotten some
Yep.
feedback, so
Yep.
after the alternative
Yep.
slides, we have the full matrix.
We do have full
Yeah,
matrix.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great. So this is probably,
I don't have my glasses.
Yep.
Could you just read these choices
yeah,
there?
just gonna go across that. I think we have each one.
We do.
Yeah.
We'll go through,
Yeah.
so we'll go through them one at a time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I was about to read them too, but.
Okay,
So these are what we call alternatives. And right now what we've done is we've done little diagrams to kind of generally indicate what it could be, but it's not a building design yet. I just want to reemphasize that. So the first option that will be, oh, sorry, that last slide was the existing school. Can we go back to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the existing school. One of the options we'll be looking at is a code and repair upgrade. So we'll be doing an analysis of what it would take to fix all of those systems I was talking about in this building. It won't change any of the rooms. We won't be moving walls around. We'll be looking at whether the program fits into it, the new program, and what the limitations might be. But mostly it'll be a number. What if you gave it new walls, new roofs, new building systems, new driveways? If you really brought it up to current standards, and what would that cost be? Every school project in the state has to go through that process. That becomes the base case, and it becomes an option. And the MSBA will fund that if it's the right balance of cost and educational appropriateness. And that's, if I boil all those choices down, ultimately the MSBA is looking for the district to make a decision on balancing cost and educational appropriateness for the district. So this will be one option. Will be a code upgrade option. So then as we look at the options, oops, it's so hard to see when they move. Are we on the second option? Or the first?
Yep.
Yeah,
Second
yes.
option, are you?
Okay,
No, I
thank-
think that's, you need
This
to
is the code upgrade.
Upgrade base repair, go to this one. So.
Yeah.
So this option is a pre-K through 3 school of 165 students on this site. So this will be one option that we're going to be looking at. It's going to be, I'm not going to go through all of the considerations at this point. I'll share where we are with it. So this is an option that takes a look at, it's about a 53,000 square foot renovation, code upgrade, base repair, second code upgrade, base repair option to fit the kids in this building. Okay, did you want to say something?
So this one would have the 4th and 5th graders
Yeah.
coming
And
here.
this one would send.
So it's renovated just to accommodate
To
pre-K.
accommodate pre-K through 3. Yeah, I apologize if this gets confusing because there are a lot of options to keep track of. So the previous one would be the pre-K through, let me click back just so we make sure. So we have a K5
K5.
is existing. Then we go to pre-K through 3, which moves the 4th and 5th grade students over here
But adds to pre-K.
and adds 2 pre-K back here because you don't have that over there now. We go to the next slide. So this is also a code upgrade base repair option for 250 students, which keeps it as a pre-K through 5 on the site. So we have 2 of those options that we're gonna be looking at. In all of the options where you move the 4th and 5th grade over here, the work to do that, if any, is not part of the project. And I'll probably keep saying that over and over again, because the MSBA will only reimburse you to do work at one site. So if this is the site where the project is, and you're moving the 4th and 5th graders over, I don't want to say they don't care, but they don't pay for anything. So if you move them here, that's great. If you tuition them to another district, not that you would do that, but it's not part of their project. So you wouldn't get any reimbursement for any work you did here to do that. We go to the next slide. So those options require no new construction. You can't do new construction. So if we begin to look at the options that would actually have some new construction, if we do the pre-K through 3 option, which for the 165 students plus the pre-K, this puts an addition on the Essex Elementary and a renovation. Again, 4th and 5th grade off-site, not here. That blue box is roughly the size of square footage you would have to add to accommodate the program in an addition renovation option, makes the building a little bit bigger. We go to the next slide. We're also going to be looking at pre-K through 5. So that keeps all the kids here in a renovation and addition option. So that's renovating the current building and adding to it. So you can see to the left in the back, that's roughly the size of the addition you would need for this option. So again, you'd be adding some classrooms, maybe a new gym. We're not sure yet. We don't have the design. But one of the advantages of a larger addition would be you could move kids out into some new classrooms and then in a phased way renovate it. So
Yeah, it's just important though, with the phases, it obviously is a longer duration for construction than a new construction option.
And if you're phasing the construction like we did here, if you brought in portable classrooms, you've probably heard of, districts that have done that. The cost of that doesn't get reimbursed by the MSBA either. So as we're looking through all of these scenarios and looking at the balance, trying to find a construction option that doesn't require you to bring portables in could be cheaper to the taxpayer in the long run. So we'll need to evaluate that. So the next option, as we move across the top, this is a new building. So we've looked at code upgrade, we've looked at renovation addition. Now we're looking at a new building. So this is a new building on the Essex site for the pre-K through 3 enrollment that we've talked about. Again, 4th and 5th grade over here. Right now, as we look at it, it may be possible to build a new building out in the back where the play fields and the playground is. This is where the existing school is. So you could have the existing school fully in session, build a new school, move the kids over, demo the old school, and rebuild ball fields and driveways. So this is a relatively simple thing, but this would be a brand new building on the site. We go to the next slide. This is the same approach, but for the bigger building. This is to keep all the kids at Essex. So in this option, this would be a new building for 250 students plus the pre-K that keeps all grades over on the site. And if you look, you may have missed it if you blinked, but there's just a little bit of a change at the end. One of the things about the school design is some things will be the same size no matter what the student population is. So the reason this only was a small increase is because all this stuff over here, the gym, the music room, the main office, cafeteria, they're all pretty much the same size, whether you have 100 kids or 250 kids, because the gym is a gym. You're just adding more classrooms to support it. So we go to the next slide. So now we're looking at options on this site. So we've looked at all the options over at the Essex site. Now we're going to look at the options that are available on this site. This is the current school where we are today. We're actually sitting up here in this blue box right there, just to give you a sense of where we are. So this is the new school, just designed for 335 students plus 45 pre-K. It's around 77,000 square feet. We go to the next slide. We're not looking at a code upgrade option for this building because this building is fully code compliant, so it's brand new. But we are going to look at, and we're not going to look at a new school on this site either because this is a new school, but we are going to look at addition renovation options. So this option is the large school option, which is pre-K through 5 for 515 students plus 60 pre-K. This brings everybody over here. So this removes the Essex Elementary. It become one elementary school on this site. And really the only place on this site to build is quite literally right out here. You've got Causeway Brook here. You've got a river setback area, the ball fields, wetlands on this side, wetlands through here. This is the main entry, so you don't want to block that. So really our only option is to put an addition generally off this end of the school, a 2-story addition for additional classroom space, additional pre-K space, small addition because the cafeteria would have to get bigger if you're increasing the student population. The gym would be the same. And then there'd be some reconfiguration of other spaces. There'd be some demolition in this area. And then to accommodate, and we don't know for sure this will fully accommodate it, but even to accommodate parking that gets displaced, we'd have to relocate the tennis courts or remove them and create some kind of parking area in that area to accommodate the new population here. And then, as I said, we've just started doing the traffic studies. So that's what happens here. One of the unique considerations for this construction is because this project was just finished recently, and because the MSBA just reimbursed you for it, certain things like construction in these areas where we have to tear down certain parts of the new building, tear up the site, remove site utilities, redo site utilities, anything that the MSBA just paid for that you are ripping up and rebuilding will likely be reduced from your reimbursement. So there'll be a kind of a double hit. I don't know if that's the right way to say it.
Cost recovery is what
Cost
they call it.
recovery,
Yeah.
clawback.
Yeah.
So you know, they paid you for it. They don't want you to tear it up and then pay you to put something else back there. So there'd be some negotiation there about how much of that was, what that cost was. But we'll, as a team, be factoring that into the reimbursement. So that would be another factor in that effective reimbursement. So for any project on this site, there'll be some additional reduction in reimbursement that wouldn't apply, I think is fair to say, over at the Essex site. I just wanted to point that out. Clearly try to minimize that, but the site is small. It's going to be very hard to avoid tearing up work that was just completed. But that's where that addition would fit. So here's what we were talking about before. So those are the options that are going to be submitted to the MSBA. They'll review those and likely agree with those as the options. I don't see them disagreeing, but they'll want to see what options we're looking at, what options were eliminated, what sites were eliminated. And then there's, I'm not going to try to read it, but there's categories here that are education, community, site, building, cost, and schedule. So there's a variety of buckets that we'll be evaluating all of these in next spring. So this all we'll be doing designs, more detailed designs for each of these. And what will probably happen is on some of these, there'll be multiple options. So, you know, on the addition renovation option, we showed a little blue box off the back. That may be one of the options. We may find that there's 2 or 3 other places that make sense to add. So we'll do a number of iterations, a number of options, for cost to those, share them with the school building committee so they can begin to evaluate which ones make sense. And slowly, the school building committee will begin removing additional options and beginning to narrow the focus so that by the time we get to the end of the next phase, it's narrowed down to the preferred option is what it's called. We're throwing a lot of jargon and acronyms at you, but the preferred option means that's the school project that will move forward through all of the other phases and you get it down to simply one. And that'll be at the end of this next phase.
You just wanna
Okay.
touch on this one? Well,
Sure.
Yeah.
Do I stop for any questions on that or clarification questions? I know it's a lot.
Okay, so just very quickly, as part of the process, the school district is asked to put together an educational program document, which essentially outlines a lot of what we were talking about tonight, if you're on the tour. What programs do we have? Our special education programming, our pre-K programming, what's our style of teaching? You know, we talked a lot tonight about the fact that we don't really put kids in rows and have a teacher standing at the front of the room any longer. And we're also not a Montessori school, which is a very different style and might need a different facility type. So we try to articulate the how we do things, the programs that we have, and then that articulation, which is available to everybody online, translates into something called the space summary. So once we put this large narrative together, explaining what we do and the programs we offer and how we partner with the community and what community spaces are offered here, it gets reduced to an Excel spreadsheet that tries to project the number of classrooms, the number of small group spaces, the number of community spaces we'll need. And I think what we're learning is that what that says now may not be what it looks like in the end, that you go through a lot of iterations of what space will look like. So it's kind of the high water mark or the beginning stage from which the designers can design. But I think what I've learned from going through this process a couple of times is the educational program isn't necessarily the end all be all, but it's the guide to the designers. So what they design represents the district and the community, and not necessarily just a design in and of itself, because there's a large world of design out there and there's many ways to approach building a school. They're going to try to build a school that fits with the schools we have in the way that we generally do things here, but doesn't prevent us from growing and changing over the years.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, just real quick, so just recapping, the preliminary design program phase. We're going to be asking SBC for approval of that, submission to the MSBA on January 6th. And then from there, we'll, start the preferred schematic report phase that, Jim and I spoke about. And then we have our next community meeting scheduled for, January 28th, and that will be back at the Essex Elementary site with a building tour ahead of, the meeting at 4:30. And that's what we have for tonight.
Curious, in your experience, have you run into a school that's fairly new, 5 to 10 years, where an addition was put on? Do you know of one in the Commonwealth?
Off the top of my head, I don't. I can't say it hasn't happened, but it's kind of unusual. So, one of the things I didn't mention, that's yet another thing the MSBA wants us to look at, is designing a building that will last 50 years. That's their,
Yep.
It's kind of a loose guideline, but that's what they're looking for, because everybody knows a roof's not gonna last 50 years. But I think to the superintendent's point, you do teaching and learning a certain way now, but we don't know in 25 years that you'll be doing it the same way. So we need a building that can adapt over time, and rooms can do different things. And some of that is, my experience, is just space. You need enough room to adapt. But I can't, none of our projects, I've been designing schools for 35 years, all parts of New England and the country. I've not come across a school that we put an addition on.
I think they have different levels. If you refurbish a school, do you get the same amount of money?
It comes down to what we're discussing about the effective reimbursement rate. So different things are not reimbursable
Right.
depending on what you're doing, whether it's new addition, renovation, code compliance. So it'll be different for each, and it may actually be different for each option. With, two new school options that we look at could have a slightly different reimbursement rate too, depending on the size of the building, the site work, because there's a lot of caps on it.
Tennis courts, that's interesting. Yeah, get rid of the tennis courts. I don't know, in this town.
That's where it might be worth, if you go back to the configuration, so the configurations that we're looking at in feasibility didn't come from a facilities mindset. They came from are there operational savings to be had by merging?
Yeah.
By merging the students into one site, or splitting those students into a smaller school with maybe lesser operational
It's a
costs.
valuable piece of property, let's face it.
But what we found in doing that, in running some numbers on the operational costs, is they're almost the merger of the most expensive operationally would be the pre-K 3 students in Essex, and moving the fourth and fifth graders here, because you're getting all the additional cost of transporting the students while still maintaining a full building in Essex. So I think it costs us about $35,000 more. It wasn't astronomical, but there wasn't a projected annual savings there. By merging all of the students onto the memorial site, you do pick up some initial staffing reductions. I think it was 2 heads. It's all in the ed plan. I can look it up if anybody wants the actual numbers, but you picked up all of the transportation costs and the cost of reciting the tennis courts. So until we had new tennis courts, we'd have to pay the MAC to house our tennis program, which would be a considerable add to the operational cost. So there wasn't something so significant in those numbers that screamed one of these options.
Sure.
Would be preferable. So I think now we're waiting to see what are the facilities building numbers. Is
Yeah, I
there
would think
something in that?
with the owner living in town, he might help us out there. Because tennis is so important. I don't play tennis, but it's to the community. They're very proud of their tennis teams, etc. So that's a good point, Manchester Club.
And I think the community would probably expect us to find a new site and rebuild the tennis courts.
Good luck.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's yeah, interesting.
So all of those things are documented in the appendix of the ed plan, kind of the analysis we went through. But we know the pains we went through to get the tennis court here, so we assume we'll get some.
Oh, that
some
lasted
questions.
5 years, I think, and 4, it's a long time.
It was a large consideration also for this project to make sure that we didn't touch the tennis courts. That was something we heard greatly from the community on. Yeah.
So, question, so operationally speaking, the difference between all of these scenarios is not large.
No, I believe it was 100,000 in the first year, maybe with the merged school, assuming that staffing stays the same. But if we have to have a special education program, you're going to lose your staffing savings out of the gate.
So the difference between each of the scenarios is 100 or it's not $1 million.
No, and didn't appear to be anything that would grow in savings over time. It would say that I would say the natural course of things with staffing fluctuations would erase any savings in the first couple of years. I think there was some thinking that there would be a significant amount of facilities management savings in terms of heating and cooling, but the projection of 42,000 square feet additional, we're losing 50,000 square feet and we're adding 42,000 square feet. I think those utility differences were small. And you're adding transportation.
Don't you have some problems with dividing a grade into classes currently? Because each school is sort of small and putting them together might give you a more standard.
It smooths it, but it doesn't reduce it. So it makes your distribution among the 4 classrooms more even, but it doesn't give you enough of a gain to drop a classroom from 4 to 3. And we're using, I mean, it needs to be said, we're using current numbers, whether something changes in the future that allows for that, like with some incremental growth in student heads over time, you may avoid having to add a classroom. Certainly that could be the case.
Totally different area.
Yep.
What are the schedule constraints from the MSBA? Do they have a deadline when you have to be ready to go? And what is that?
So as part of your feasibility study agreement that you went into with the MSBA, you basically confirmed that you want to study 3 grade configurations, which were the pre-K through 365 students scenario, which is the pre-K through 3 at Essex, and then the 4th and 5th grade would go to this school here. You agreed to your pre-K through 5, 250 students at the Essex site, and you agreed to your pre-K through 5 all in Manchester, Essex on this site. So that's part of your agreement.
You're going in a direction that I didn't mean.
Well, I'm just trying to explain as far as when you sign that agreement with those 3 grade configurations, you have 913 days to complete your feasibility study agreement.
Roughly 913 days.
I don't know why it's 913, but that's the rules that they set, and it's 913 days for your feasibility study agreement phase.
So it's August 4th of next. Is that the August 4th of next year date? I believe so.
I have it on my phone saved because I get this question a lot.
And
August-
immediately after the feasibility study, you have to start spending serious money.
If we followed the pattern of the memorial school, once we take the vote, then we will start to work with, well, I mean, we'll do some projection work ahead of time, but once you have the public vote in support of the design and the budget for the design, so basically appropriating the money, then you work with the financial advisors to start structuring your loan package. With the middle high school, we did a series of small loans up front and then went for a larger loan down the line. So if you took and with Memorial School, we took the whole thing because that was advantageous. Depending on which road you go down, you could stretch, I mean, because I know there's some interest in kind of trying to align the larger payments with some debt roll off on the towns. I think what we're going to try to study over the next few months in preparation for the fall is what are your options for bonding smaller amounts or banning, always get those wrong, smaller amounts to meet the timeline with that would be most advantageous for the towns. So I think it depends it depends on what path you choose when the big payment starts to hit.
Is there anyone online? If you do want to ask a question, please just put your hands up and we can unmute you.
No hands at the moment.
Thank you.
Any thoughts or opinions on the scenarios that are out there right now?
You know, you gotta look at Essex point of view. I mean, that property is worth a slug of money there. Serious money. I mean, that's a plus. If it comes here and they sell that property. Something to look at. Now, do we have transportation now? Is school buses coming from Essex to Manchester?
For the middle high school, yeah.
For the middle, did you have to pay for that?
Mhm.
You have to pay.
There's about 90,000 a run, yes. So we need to add 2 runs. I think that it was an addition of 2 runs to move everyone in Essex, because you'd have no one in the walking zone. You'd need full
Yeah, sure.
transportation, so you should run 2 buses. Which is why with your pre-K 3, 4, 5 scenario, you have to run additional buses because you have to still bus to Essex and then you have to have another bus run coming, dedicated 1 or 2 buses coming here. And we projected for the need for a late bus.
So your point as an architect, I mean, when you look at the 2 possibilities, I mean, it seems like this would be an easier fare than starting I mean, even the state looking at it, I mean, would they look positively at this with the addition versus building a new building in Essex?
I'm not gonna
Sure,
speak
you
for
don't
what
have-
the MSBA will look at, but they'll look at the combination of factors of, they start with the education plan. And one of the things about the MSBA is they start with what the district has decided is their education plan. And then they'll look at how well the options fit that plan.
Yeah.
So they're gonna look at the cost and they're gonna look at whether the planning makes sense, because we do have to ultimately get their approval as well. You have to go through a process to get approval for them to buy into it. I don't know. That's what we will be looking at in that next phase. We really don't know.
Because I would
Makes the
think
most
that we
sense.
have a good educational plan. I mean, this is a stellar school system.
And actually, when we brought the educational plan for this building there, they were highly complimentary of it when we went through it. But what they'll want to look is, they'll look at the educational plan, but mostly they'll look at, does the building you're proposing, whether it's an addition here, an addition at Essex, a new building there, does that support what you say you want to do? Because they will challenge you and say, "Oh, excuse me, you say you want to teach this, but we see nothing in the plan that supports that," or it looks like it's awfully crowded for the number of kids you want to have in that
Or
building.
would have to delete something and they said, well, that's.
Yeah, so they'll look at the appropriateness of the physical space and does it support what you've agreed to as a community you want to teach and how you want to teach and how you want the kids to learn. So that's what they'll look at. They won't support a plan that shortchanges.
And I think what I'm learning is getting a second go around with the ed plan is it's a lot of the broader programming and not so much. I mean, they're very interested and want to know what techniques we use to teach math or literacy, but it's more, we're committed to having pre-kindergarten.
Yeah.
To fully, to make available to all of our students in both communities, if we should have universal pre-K, you would need to consider how many classrooms you'll really need, and does your site have the ability to expand when that need arises? Right now, we've projected about a 60 to 70% capture of the available students. If we start to really promote the program when we have space, we're up to 3 classrooms now. So we're planning for 2 here and 2 at Essex with the new project. But should we have to provide for every pre-K student available in the two towns, if it became a universal access, we would need more classrooms. So which site is going to allow us to have growth opportunity there? We're going to change our math program over the next few years. Changing the math program isn't going to require us to have more space, but special education student needs may require us to have more space, or space that can fully accommodate kids in wheelchairs or kids with other mobility devices. So I think there's a lot centered around how we teach in terms of breakout space and having room for centers and such in classrooms. But I think the pieces that are really tied to the facility design are what things can we maybe project or imagine are coming our way 50 years down the line, and which setup is going to allow for us to adapt to them. You know, there's several building projects happening or potentially happening in Manchester. If we have another surge and we gain back those 200 students that have left the system, where are they all going if we max out space in one of these scenarios? So that's why we have the technical experts looking at it and advising us. But those are some of the considerations I think that are also captured in the ed plan, where we tend to think more about curriculum. It's a lot more about systems and structures.
You mentioned the surge. One of the things the MSBA will require us to do for all the options is show them where in the future you would add to the building. So we did it for this building, and the addition, it was smaller. It was 2 classrooms at the end of the pre-K. That was set aside. We made sure that would be the area you would add, but they'll ask that for any of these options. We'll have to assure them that if in 20 years you need 3 more classrooms, 4 more classrooms, there's a place to do that on the site. And that'll be different for each of these scenarios based on how small the site is or how large the site is.
I notice when you walk in the back, there's a couple of large where they have the play and there's a big piece of property back there. I mean, going up to, I don't know. Is that your little boxes you made reference to in the back?
The Essex site.
At the Essex site?
No, I mean here.
Oh, here? Yeah, there's really, there's a playground outside the kindergarten or outside the cafeteria here. And then we have a setback from wetlands because there's a pretty significant wetlands right behind the project. So it limits how far back you can go. And we do have to have playgrounds. That's a requirement.
Yeah,
part of that.
Yeah, I understand.
Part of it. So
Jim, can you explain the main entry and how it's not just a main entry, but there's some structural components there?
well, yeah, I mean, actually, well,
In case
sure.
somebody would ask the question, why
Yeah.
wouldn't you just?
So the reason we haven't shown construction here is because this entire parking area underground has stormwater retention basins built into it. So because when we did this project, because the site is relatively small and we went through a very extensive process to make sure the building and the site were friendly to the river and the wetlands and the ecological aspects of this site. We actually made it better because the old school used to come down into the river area. So we were able to pull the whole building back away from the setbacks and the regulated area. But to do that, we had to create a very large set of underground, they're called galleys, but it's basically big pipes that when it rains, that retains the stormwater and then releases it slowly. So you don't have flooding, you don't have inundation in the brook. So that's this whole area in here.
And then off of the community entry
And then right
to the
here,
left of that,
here.
that's a rain garden that we had to put in per Concom for our order conditions, just based off of all the parameters that Jim was just talking about on site. If you go to the next slide where you see that option, this eliminates that rain garden because there's nowhere else really to build on the site,
Yeah.
just due to all the setbacks that Jim was talking about. So we are concerned with still studying this option about what we're going to be required of adding back to the site per Conservation Commission within the town of Manchester.
And because we're adding more impervious surface with more roof area, we're gonna have to add an additional replace that rain garden and potentially add an additional one. So that's why we have to study this. It's gonna take us some time to begin to look at that because this was a very tight site when we did this project. Part of it was because we had a school next door we had to build around, but it's a tight site because you do have a lot of wetlands. You have a lot of houses that are relatively close. We tried to be very careful. We talked to all the neighbors. So yeah, we've got some underground things you can't see. that would need to be replaced and enlarged.
Yeah.
We also don't actually know yet about the utilities here, whether the electric and the utilities coming to this building can support that, or do we need to bring additional services in? We have to look at that as well.
Yeah, so you have several different options here in terms of school structures. If you were to just make a general estimate based on X to a multiple of X, what's the least expensive to the most expensive? Not in terms of absolute dollars, just.
We don't know that at this time. We're still studying it because we're at such a preliminary phase of the project. We are currently working with some cost estimators on just reviewing high level assumption costs just based off of comparing the options. By no means do the values mean a total project budget or a construction budget value. So we're at a really still high level when it comes to dollar
That's why I
values.
placed it as an X.
Yeah. And that's how we're gonna place it too during this phase is that, when we get to like a preferred option or to a couple options, as Jim was talking about in the next phase, we'll have further evaluation and drawings and things like that of square footages that when we go to our estimators, it will be a lot more value associated, so we can kind of hone in on that cost association.
I will say that while total, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was just. At that point, will you have one option or 6?
So when at the next phase, which is the preferred schematic report phase that ends in May, we are going to take some of those 6, 7 options and further refine them down. We'll work with cost estimators at that point where we'll have better ideas about square footages and adjacencies. And that's when we present costs associated with like your 3 or 4 preferred options. And that's when then the SVC approves their preferred option.
So you have costs for multiple options as
Right.
part of the evaluation.
You will have costs for multiple options and
Yes.
but you don't yet.
We don't yet.
Yeah.
And what I was gonna talk, just to elaborate a little bit,
Mhm.
there's the total cost, the X, but then there's the cost to the taxpayer and to the town. And that's based on what your reimbursement rate is, and that's gonna vary between the options depending on what the MSBA thinks is reimbursable or not. We have worked in towns where the most expensive option in absolute dollars was actually less expensive than the other one because you got more reimbursement than you did in this.
And that involves construction costs, site costs, all of those
Yeah.
effective reimbursement caps that I was talking about earlier.
So if you're looking at the cost of the taxpayer, you really have to go through that whole exercise so you understand what that cost is, and you're looking at both of those.
It's coming.
And that's why this process takes months and years.
So, what issues did you have with, abutters about parking and traffic when you redid the school? I understand there was a school before, so nothing new, but suddenly if you busing in and potentially a lot, hundreds of children from Essex, I would assume that wouldn't go over well with the butters. Would you?
I mean, I can, you
Go
can
ahead.
speak to what
Well,
you
they
did.
call
the
they
site
call
tech-
you, they didn't call me.
But up until the new building, Jim had said it earlier, one of the problems to solve when we built the new building was trying to cut down on the amount of queuing or backup on Lincoln Street. Because we have busing for everybody, but a lot of people still like to
Right.
drop off. So the lineup would be back to the high school and beyond. So that's why they took great pains to create a big long loop to pull cars off the road. I have to say, and I can double check with John, I'm not hearing or seeing as much backup or hearing concerns about it any longer. So I think we solved for that problem. I don't think the buses coming in necessarily would pose a big problem because there's a process for that. But we have to assume a good portion of parents will be dropping off. So I think you'll have to study what the implications might be.
Yeah, we do have a traffic study underway for all the sites, so they'll be able to give us some sense for each of these options, again, along with cost, what are the traffic implications? I think that was probably the biggest one. And then there's always concerns that neighbors have about how close the building might be to them, whether light trespass will be in their bedrooms or their backyard. So I mean, those are normal and understandable concerns. We have all of those here.
And on the flip side, through these next few community meetings and in our building committee meetings, I would love to hear inputs from families in Essex who the drive time, the pickup concerns. There are after school programs here. They are fee for service. So kind of what's the implication on kind of the life of the parent in removing the elementary school from Essex and placing all of the students here? I mean, we can talk a lot about I think there are, just knowing what we went through for this building and kind of listening to the preliminary conversations, there was a lot of site challenges, but then there's the whole concept that our regional agreement is very clear that there should be a school in each town and that they are kind of the home bases and key elements in each of the communities. They serve as community centers to a certain degree for both towns in terms of town meetings and gathering spots. So there's a whole community conversation around making a major turn from the original intent of the district. And that's why if we choose one of those configurations, this all goes on hold. So the numbers and all, that'll all go on hold while we have the conversation about school committee determining redistricting, and then the community has to agree to change the regional agreement. So those elements are in the ed plan because they're foundational to how we're structured and how we organize what we do. So the community is going to have to weigh in on that piece. So we'll have to go through that process. It could be, we haven't done it, so I don't really know whether or not we get it done right away this spring at town meeting, or if it would take us a little longer, but everything will go on hold until that's resolved. And then we'll have to pick back up and try and make our deadline, which I think our drop dead deadline is August of 2027.
It's, yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
And just to be clear, what the drop dead deadline means is local approval, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you'd have to get through town meeting approval and
Go back.
that exclusion.
But after you go to both town meetings for a regional agreement
Yeah.
amendment as well.
Right.
So it'd be like 2 rounds of town meetings.
You know, I was just curious. I know when we started the high school and the junior high, I know that at meetings they say, well, we want to make sure that we have our own
Mhm.
school. And I was surprised when I went to the first meeting. I didn't hear, we want our own school. I'm not hearing that. So is their mindset changing? But you brought up a good point, you know, it's financial, but how do you get the kids here? Rain, snow, that's something to think about.
Mhm.
Very quiet there, that meeting. I mean, it was a good meeting, but
But having a school in your town, elementary school, is very important. I think it creates a sense of community for the kids and a life to the city. And it brings new families if they know that there's an elementary school. So I think it's very important also to take that in consideration as we are linked together, Manchester and Essex. There's good times and bad times, like in every relationship, but I think, having these 2 different schools, I think for me, I think it's important for the population of Essex and the student business.
And it would present interesting work for us, because as I would think about it, and I'm going to think about it as like an interesting challenge, I think we would have to talk about, like, if we're going to become MERSD Elementary School, it's not Essex Elementary School and Memorial Elementary School anymore. It's a whole new entity with a whole new identity and culture that has to be developed. So everybody's going to have to be willing to give up a little bit of what makes them unique. And I think we've tried to do that in terms of making sure everybody's got the same math program and got the same literacy approach, but that's just professional technique. That's not, the clam, I want to say clam fest, but the Happy as a Clam race versus, just things like coming together around the 5th grade play, or the fun run that we do here at Memorial. Everyone we have a combined identity, but then we have our own independent pieces. So it's going to take, I think, a lot of focus and work, and we write about this in the ed plan, that if we come together as one, the work and focus of the elementary schools for the next few years is going to have to be to create that combined culture and generate buy-in in a sense of community among all of the members. It's not just like, come on over and join this group. It's create a whole new thing.
Can I also say that it drastically changes the student experience if you put all of those students here? It's a more dense population. I just think, I was on the building committee for the Memorial School, you sold a product to a town. And now you're asking the town to reconsider that product in a whole different way. That a lot of, there was a lot of investment in those underground storage tanks. I mean, that was a lot of money, a lot of time. I just don't think, we also have to consider it's not just about Essex kids, it's also about the kids in Manchester and also the community of Manchester and having a significant number of people coming into town every morning and afternoon. Not that, we're good people, but it's just a lot of little kids in a very, very congested space. And I just don't know if our two communities want that to be the elementary school experience. Is that a fair way to kind of?
Yeah, and it's worth reminding or going back and just letting people know that there's a report that was done when we did move forward with the Memorial School project that studied creating a lower school and an upper school, creating a merged school, and they were all rejected by the community. And that was the school committee task force. There was a survey, there was a series of focus groups. And some of the things that are being talked about here tonight did come up in that report. The idea of the size of the building. At the time, there were 430 students at Memorial and close to 300 at Essex. So we were talking about over 700 students in one facility. So that idea of the scope and the density of the building changing the experience was a big part of it. We were talking about doing a true pre-K2 in a 3-5 building where one town would host the lower school and one town would host the upper school. And there was not any support for moving the young kids into the opposite towns. And what came up over and over again was the importance of having an elementary school in the community, because that is what they agreed to when they began a region, that there would always be that school in each of the towns. So I think it would be a course change. I think it's valid for us to study it and to look if there are compelling reasons to reconsider what was done before, but there is a whole piece of it that has nothing to do with finance. It has a lot to do with what the communities want. And I think there's a value and there's an X factor in determining the true cost of the project based on what it means to the community and what, we might be willing to pay to maintain the two versus bring them together.
Can I say one other thing? And that is about Essex has a potential development coming online for 22. And I know that Manchester has a couple potential building projects. Don't know if either of them will happen, but even if one of those happens, the MSBA did not take those into account because they weren't real.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think this is I think doing work here at Memorial is risky based on what could possibly be happening in our two towns. And I'll show you.
If I can.
I have a strange question. Okay, so you are going to offer propose different options to the MSBA. Can they refuse all of them and look at you and say, come back with new options? We don't like this, we don't like that. Or is it a done deal and they have to accept one of the options?
So the way it'll work is we will be in January presenting this set of options to be studied.
Yes.
They could comment on, they will comment on them. It's unlikely. I've never seen them reject options because at this point, all we're doing is saying, we're setting the table. These are the things we want to look at. when we get down to the single final option that the community and through the school building committee has voted on, then they do have the ability to approve or disapprove. But we will have been working with them all the way through, so they'll have a chance to comment. We've all worked, it's unlikely that they would say no. They may want us to tweak something, that's happened.
Yeah.
They go through phases where they like different things. We've added bus canopies to projects because they think students should have cover when they get off the bus. I mean, it would be that kind of a thing that they might look at.
And for people who haven't maybe been following this from the beginning, the configuration options and the feasibility are things we asked to study. Because when we applied for the statement of interest, which is basically our grant application, you submit an application telling them about the condition of your building, and they assess your building against other buildings that have applied for the program and a set of standards, and they come back and say, they said to us, yep, your building is close to being, is end of life, you're out of options, you're a candidate for this program. Then we tell them what we want to study in feasibility. Based on our statement of interest, their assumption was we were just rebuilding. We were going to either renovate or rebuild Essex Elementary School where it is, just like we did here. There was a lot of budget discussions, and through feedback to school committee, these two configuration options emerged as community points of interest. So we thought it might be good to build them into the feasibility, and the school committee pushed on that so we could have a real answer to those questions. So we went back to MSBA and said, can we add these into the feasibility? And they said yes. So it's making a little bit more work now, and it's a little bit more complicated. But I think as we go through these next phases, even when we start to get the initial top level numbers, we'll start to be able to put some data points behind what before was more of a common sense approach. I think if you lived through the memorial project, you know this site is very tight. There's not a lot of space. There are a lot of environmental constraints. It wasn't easy, but it will map it all out. So it'll be clear to everybody. And maybe we're going to be surprised and it actually is the best solution. So
But it turned out well. I mean, it's a beautiful setup. You know, you all should be congratulated because, I mean, I remember it was built. I said, well, what is the old school still sitting there? When are they going to take that down? I mean, to think of that was great. And the state said, it's a good idea.
the state really, from the MSBA perspective, they want to make sure we're doing our due diligence, that we're informing the community, and that we're doing things in a way that the data is there to support our argument, and that no one entity in this project is driving it in a different direction. So they're kind of there to be the guardrails for the project team working with the design team on behalf of the community. So I think if we emerge with a vote of the community that supports a preferred design, unless there's something structurally wrong with what's happening, that they're there to support it. We'll get there. Right now, we're projecting that next fall we'll be ready to have, we're trying to follow the same blueprint as the Memorial School. So it looks like if all things come together and all parties agree, there's a good likelihood that next fall there'd be a special town meeting on just this topic.
Why just that topic?
That was the recommendation last go around with the Memorial School, so that we would have one meeting dedicated to just this, so it wouldn't. There were topics that were on town meeting agendas at the time that would kind of take over the whole meeting, and the feeling was this may be cut short because there could be a dogs on the beach type thing, or a zoning issue that also required a lot of attention. I think people wanted to ensure that everyone would have the opportunity.
So that's why you're talking about October, so that there's room for a November general special election.
General special election. Yeah, it would tie right into the state election.
Town meeting. whatever it is.
Yeah. So it would be like, when we did Memorial School, was it the 19th or is it going to be? It was like that third week of October. We went back-to-back nights. One night we went Manchester, the next night we went Essex, and then everybody voted on the same day. And when I go back and look at the notes, the conversation was, everyone will have ample opportunity. We can go through a presentation if we need to, ask questions, answer questions. We can run it all the way through. Nobody will be cut short. And then everybody's voting on the same day, so it won't be like one voted yes. We'll just all find out at the same time. Whether that is still, I mean, we are very willing to take input and recommendations from the towns on how to structure it. I'm just trying to follow the same blueprint we did last time. And we are within days of that timeline, really, and how we're moving. Yep. Anything else? So this was a replay, but in January, we're going to be starting on, there will be more development of the designs. There'll be opportunities to weigh in on some of those. So hope to see you all back here or tuned in online. Numbers will start to be discussed. Ranges.
X's and Y's.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for coming out. Did Carlos open the kitchen?
He said he was going to do it right.
Okay, so we think that the kitchen
Think
has
it's
been
open.
opened if anyone wants to take a peek at the new equipment and see how that looks.